Ci siamo? Perfetto. Vado? Ok. Salve a tutti, grazie di essere qui. Io mi chiamo Stefano Secondino, sono un giornalista dell'ANSA, mi occupo di energia ed ambiente e sono qui per fare il moderatore. Questo panel, che durerà circa un'ora e un quarto, quindi state tranquilli che andiamo a mangiare ad un'ora decente. Questo panel ha un titolo abbastanza complesso, si chiama Cambiamenti, diversità, monitoraggio dinamico delle pressioni antropiche sugli ecosistemi marini. Ecco, forse potevano trovare un titolo un pochino più semplice, ma sostanzialmente cerchiamo di capire quali sono i principali problemi che riguardano la presenza umana sugli oceani, cioè quali sono i danni che noi possiamo fare agli oceani, come si possono monitorare e come si possono comprendere meglio. Per spiegarci bene qual è il rapporto tra tra essere umano ed oceano e quali sono i problemi maggiori, abbiamo qui con noi Elena Ciappi.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you. So today we have a set of panelists and also from the marine engineering, and she will talk about all of the technologies involving the sea. And then we also have Giancarlo Cristofalo, who is from the Fugro company, which is a company that does, for instance, a number of in-depth surveys. So they are the ones that map the seabeds and check what is there. Then we have Gianmaria Sannino, who is from ENEA, and he is a climatologist. Namely, he specifically deals with the various models of risk reduction at the sea level. And last but not least, we have Stefania Valentini from Federpesca, which is the Association of Fisheries Companies, member of Confindustria, and she will share with us the point of view of fishermen, that is to say, those that derive their profits from the sea. So that's actually the end of the introduction, and let's move on to our speakers. So Elena Ciappi from the CNR. So Elena, what do you generally do? What is your main area of activity? Well, within the Sea Engineering Institute, we deal with the development of blue technologies. Blue technologies intended as both sustainable for the marine environment, but also blue also in terms of blue economy, that is to say the activities at sea that need to grow and need to be developed, but by preserving the environment. So we also deal with sustainable transportation, safe transformation, and sea engineering and digital technologies and their enforcement. And in particular, what I would like to present to you today very shortly is three main challenges. The first one linked to the zero emission maritime transport. We know that 90% of goods generally shaped by the sea. So that sea transportation produces greenhouse gases emission by 2.5% of the total. And we also have some goals that we need to achieve by 2030, that is set to reduce these emissions by 50% and to zero these emissions by 2050. But the maritime transportation also has a huge impact on the marine environment. In particular, the noise pollution and the noise generated by the ships and the vessels, which disturbs severely fishes and sea mammals. And also, this entails a change of behavior for them. And I would like to mention that there's also a chemical pollution component deriving from the pouring at the sea and generated from the release of chemical substances, including, for instance, paintings that sometimes are used. So what can we do? First of all, it is possible that, well, by using all of the technologies already available, we may improve the situation by 30 to 40% by using the digital design and the optimization of the shape of vessels, and sometimes, for instance, also to have efficient and silent means. But then there's a big change of paradigm, that is to say that of using entirely clean fuels like methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, and have vessels that have electric engines or hybrid engines. Clearly enough, the new fuels need to be produced in a sustainable way, hence by using clean energy. And at this point, I would like to come to the second challenge we are dealing with, that is to say the renewables from the sea. Then wind energy, which is a mature energy, and also the energy that we can, for instance, derive from the waves. But having considered that the sea is a crowded place where a lot of activities exist and they have to coexist, it is not possible to have any conflicts, especially and also for the environmental sustainability. So this is a project which is being developed, so the energy area, or also the situation to which we can have floating structures for capturing the energy from the sun. And the energy produced, well, how can it be used? Of course, it can be transferred to the ground, but it can also be used to produce the fuels, the clean fuels that I mentioned before, and to have a sort of fueling station for the ships and vessels of the future. Then also the desalinization of the seawater, which is very important, especially in some regions of the world. And also, these can be a specific monitoring station that receives and transfers data. And this is fundamental for a series of things, but many of you know that as regards data, and as to the data availability, there's another challenge, that is to say the digital twin of the ocean, and this is an international challenge. This means that what we want to do is to have a complex system as the sea, made up of a lot of subsystems, that is to say both variable ones, so biological systems and geological systems, and all of the anthropic or man-led activities. And through the data that we have and that we continuously for instance, manage, we can also build a twin, a digital twin of the physical situation. And we can do that by using machine learning and artificial intelligence. That is done in order to have something that evolves as the physical twin, and it can also be used to predict what is going to happen in the future, and that this is important also for decision makers and policy makers. Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Because, well, I deal a lot with renewable energy sources. The fact of seeing all of these beautiful projects for the production of green hydrogen and also for fueling ships and vessels is absolutely important, and it's the challenge for the next few years. But now, let's see the sea from a different perspective. And let's see the seabeds. Why am I saying this? Because Giancarlo Cristofalo deals with, or better, his company Fugro participates in an international project involving the mapping of the seabeds in the world. And therefore we can have a mapping of the seabeds, because sometimes we have a total and complete mapping of the moon and of Mars, but not of our seas. That is the reason why we have this project, Seabed 2030, that includes and envisages the total mapping of our seabeds. And this is managed by the Fugro company. So please, Giancarlo, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Stefano. Well, I would like to thank the INGV and all those that contributed to organize this event. And Fugro is also launching some other activities to celebrate this important day, which is so important for all of us. And I would like to refer to what Stefano said, because Fugro is an international company, a leading company that deals with the submarine surveys, and we operate in the private sector in the renewables energy sources, and we are also strong when it comes to the International Oceanographic Commission, because we are part of this EOC Alliance. And we have also participated and are still participating. Actually, we contributed to the development of the Seabed 2030 project that envisages the mapping by 2030 of, the mapping of all the oceans, and this is not entirely done. So the project, the Seabed 2030 project, was launched by the Nippon Foundation and by JEPCO Seabed Project. So this is the Global Bathymetric Chart Organization, which collects all of this data and makes this data public. For instance, with Google Earth, if you read, the bathymetry is provided by JEPCO at the world level. And there's also a short video that I would like to show to you in order to better explain what we do. Thank you.
Whilst the primary purpose of hydrography remains the production of navigational charts, the role of hydrographers is changing fast. The focus is moving towards the entire marine estate, as the challenges of climate change, population growth, and urbanization in coastal communities drive demand for hydrographic and oceanographic information. Today, Fugro is responding by investing in the innovative technology needed to ensure the hydrographic community is positioned to play a more efficient, effective, and important role in managing the environment and resources for a livable world. The future for hydrography is exciting. Data collected once will be used many times, and the quantity and variety is set to increase significantly with more multi-parameter data collected across a broader range of environments from an increasing range of sensors, including acoustic and light. Collection will be more autonomous, with objects such as natural features, marine life, and man-made objects automatically identified anywhere in the marine environment. The increasing use of autonomous vehicles on extended missions and monitored and directed from mission control centers on land and afloat will reduce the number of people at sea. And as collection becomes more efficient, the volume of repeat surveys will increase, enabling the use of change detection and forecasting to play greater roles in how we manage resources and assets. The rapidly increasing volumes of data will be processed in new ways. As it's collected, it will be transferred to the cloud in near real time and processed using more automated techniques based on complex algorithms and artificial intelligence. As the amount of human time required for collection and processing diminishes, more time will be spent on interpreting and understanding as data is transformed into actionable information. As a result, the skills required across the hydrographic community will change, creating demand for new training and education programs and providing new career opportunities. Fugro is a global market and technology leader with innovative, high-performance equipment, software, and business processes. We recognize that the world's oceans and coasts can be challenging and hostile, so we're continuing to design purpose-built vessels equipped with our own innovative technology that are more robust, safe, and environmentally friendly, and which will be the leaders in their class for years to come. Along with our client, research institute, industry, and university partners, we're on a journey to address these opportunities through sustainable capabilities that benefit all. So, join us as we prepare for the future of hydrography.
Scusate per la pomposità del video, comunque sì.
That was quite a video. Anyway, this is what we do, although it appears that we do huge things. We collect data to create knowledge of the seabed, and also in this way we can define where to install a wind park and then to contribute to the knowledge of the seabed within, for instance, renewable energy projects. And, well, then you can also tell us, for instance, in detail, because there will be another round of questions, you will tell us what is all this activity for and what are the criticalities in place. But now let's is a climatologist from that I understood about him because he's the Well, okay, the first laboratory out of the three deals with climate change. Another one deals with hydrogeological risk, and the other one presents activities. And one of the things we do is to understand how can we use this energy, and also besides studying climate change or predict climate change, we also try to give solutions, and you know that ENEA. And we also try to find solutions there. So today presentation is going to be divided into two parts. It's going to be on one side of the report by the IPCC, which is the international body made up of 100 researchers that provide a voluntary contribution, and they provide information on what is being collected when it comes to climate change. Climate change is widespread, rapid, and unprecedented, and therefore we are in the mid of a climate crisis, and the temperature in the last 130 years has increased by 1 degree centigrade, which seems to be very little, but the problem is in particular something which is linked to the degree centigrade. So if you look at it in the last million years, this chart, especially the left-hand side one, shows that, for instance, what it has to do with nature, but not just nature, because the increase in temperature is our fault. And of course, we are trying to position a huge quantity of carbon dioxide, and sometimes in order to explain what we did, it is as if we have had maybe our dinner instead of 1 hour in 4 seconds. So the quantity of carbon dioxide that we've administered and supplied and released into the atmosphere has happened in a short period of time. The atmosphere has always been used to have more or less carbon dioxide, but we're talking about 50,000 years, whereas we did that in 130 years. And this is the reason the planet so there's a sort of over-release of carbon dioxide. And we have, for instance, a situation of the ice years and also an extension of, or an increase of the sea levels, and also reduction, for instance, when it comes to the glaciers. And the problem here is the energy associated to this degree. But then we need to see where we're going to live and how we're going to live, because the climate we're going to have until the end of the century. And also, well, this is something that depends on us. And you may also see that there are a series of pathways that we can take into consideration. According to the pathway, will have a more or less warm area. So the temperature increase that we expect, for instance, if we have the Paris Agreement, and if we limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees at a global level, then at the bottom on the right-hand side, we see what the situation can be if we continue to live as we did so far, and if we continue to behave like this in the next few years. And also, please consider we are talking about 1.5 degrees. As a matter of fact, the International Meteorology Institution says that we may reach and exceed the 1.5 degrees, because in the meantime, we are also considering El Nino, that this year is starting to become stronger, and therefore there will be some effects from this point of view. I'll stop you 1 second. Okay, then let us move on to the next.
I will highlight a couple of things. First of all, many people said that global warming has not an anthropic cause, and it's always been there. Well, you provided a scientific response to this. It is true that in Middle Age it was warm, the climate, compared to now, but the wide climate changes used to happen in thousands and thousands of years, while now it happens in 130 years, as you said. So I will add just another element. El Niño, it is a phenomenon of global warming in the eastern and central Pacific. So if you do not know, actually, this is a phenomenon that took place in very little time. Our third speaker is Stefania Valentini. She belongs to Federpesca. The companies, fishing companies, are united in Federpesca. Those who are fishers are blamed because they are considered as those who exploit to the maximum the sea resources, and intensive fishing tends to exploit and to deplete the resources available. Well, in general, it is healthier to eat a fish-based diet compared to a meat-based diet. Well, but when considering the critics coming from several sectors in the fishing industry saying that there is an exploitation of natural resources, what is your reply? First of all, thank you for the invitation. and I also bring you the greetings on Federpesca. Well, I would start from the question you've asked, and I will provide you some data. Some data that will represent and show you the productive system in fishing. We have data related to 2021 from the Agricultural Ministry, and our Italian fleet for fishing counts around 12,000 units, of which, and now I start with the figures, 8,429 from small fishing and 2,000 units for trawling fishing, and drags, hydraulic drags, we have 700 units, around 700 units. Well, the figures are maybe closer to the part concerning aquaculture. The consumption provides us a data that is very interesting, and this is an answer to our consumption of fish. Pro capita, the data provided from the Ministry of Agriculture, we have a consumption of 29.29 kilos per year. The disembarkment, and this data reflects our production sector. The national fishing sector has an impact by 3% on national GDP. We have seafood products counting for 3.55 million tons. So, only in Italy, so the data are related only to Italy. So why am I providing to you those data? Because when we discuss about fishing, and I'm glad to be here today because this forum is very important, well, I do not like to talk about intensive fishing, but instead I'd rather use sustainable and selective fishing. I prefer those terms. Fishing and fishing management is subject to Europe and European Commission regulations. We do have a regulation that every 5 years is modified, if possible, according to the data collected by Europe on the seafood products conservation, and there are every 5 years modifications in this regulation. So I would start from this point. Fishing is subject to regulation. Any activity or any management activity in fishing is regulated sustainably with fishing nets that have to comply forcibly with criteria that are set in the regulations, or a stop period of fishing that we all know, or prohibited areas to fishing to allow the reproduction of some species. And why do I specify all of this? Because the impact on the fishing system and Italian system, fishing system, also implies an awareness campaign, a sensibilization of fishing operators and actors who are in the front line to fight against illegal fishing. Because we do have a very worrying and concerning phenomenon, such as illegal fishing, which has a very negative impact. We can even imagine with friends or colleagues of sports fishing, well, we see some fishermen who carry out without worrying if the catch concerns some particular kinds of fishes that are smaller or are in a reproductive phase. So they do not consider all of those aspects. So today, I would really like to state this. I'm talking about small-scale fishing or wide-scale fishing, aquaculture. We can consider aquaculture as a separate branch of it, but I would like to state that there is a wide awareness on this topic, and the operators and the actors are well aware of how they can embrace a sustainable fishing method. Thank you. Thank you, Stefania. Let's go back maybe to Elena Ciappi. So, on the three fields of maritime engineering you're dealing with, the one that is more interesting to me is the renewable production at sea, because the objectives of the energy plan called PNIEC are those of concerning the installation of around 70 gigawatt of new renewable resources by 2030, but considering the new European targets, the threshold will be raised to 80 gigabytes. I do not know if we will get to the objective as a country, and Minister Pichetto says that we will be able to get to 10 to 12 gigawatt per year of new renewable energies, but we used to get last year to arrive to 3 gigawatts. I do not think it is that easy to get to 12 this year. So it is very interesting to understand how we can use some renewable sources, not only on land, but at sea. Yes, I agree. And this is exactly the focus of our work at the Institute, because in Italy, we have a focus on our seas. The technology for offshore wind is for sure a very solid and strong technology, while there is a challenge concerning the respect compared to the Northern Sea implants. Well, we should have floating implants and plants. This means that we have several issues and challenges from a technological point of view, because the seabed is deeper here in Italy, and this means that if we want to discuss sustainability and seabed sustainability, we need to find solutions that are easier and more sustainable compared to others, but we have to consider also moorings and other issues. There are technological challenges and some permission challenges, and the procedures to obtain permissions have to be facilitated. There are, for example, huge numbers of propositions of applications to obtain an authorization for offshore plants that are located, for example, in Puglia region or Sicily, Sardinia, the regions where wind is very important and is a key element. So what we need to do for me is that from a regulatory perspective, we should have a path that is very easy and clear, and to reduce red tape, basically, because all of those regulations for sure are mandatory and they have to be done, but there are some groups of experts, pool of experts, who will assess those aspects. And from a technological perspective, we should support research so that we can find solutions on a wide scale situation. For example, we have some pioneering and pilot plants at sea, allowing us to validate and test the solutions that we have conceived, new solutions as well, for installations that are sustainable. Since you still have a couple of minutes to explain to us the challenges, there is another challenge: maritime transportation with zero emissions. What is the way we can adopt? What is the method with biofuels, for example, and hydrogen? Both of them are not that easy to produce because biofuels can be obtained by cooking fuel oils, vegetable oils, and resinous oil as well is very interesting for the production of biofuels, but the production by 2030 is 6 million tons. But if you consider that we need 4.5 million tons for the Air Force in Italy, you understand that it is not enough. And as per hydrogen, boats and ships could travel by hydrogen. But this kind of hydrogen, to be sustainable, needs to be produced in a green way. And we do not have this green energy. So the fact of creating new renewable energy poses a huge challenge. So as far as I know, I tried to focus my attention on those two challenges. So what can we do then to decarbonize as soon as possible maritime transportation? Well, as I quoted earlier in my presentation, there are some studies and projects that are developed at a European level showing that if we would implement all the technologies available that are already available, we could reduce greenhouse emissions by 70%. I do not know if those estimates are that realistic, but while we wait for the green transition, the transition towards hydrogen, this would be something relevant. It is not necessarily the use of natural gas, but the use of new technologies. The fact of having boats with a surface created and conceived in a certain manner. For example, the whale skin or the skin of the lotus flower, those materials allow at sea, allow the boats to reduce the friction by 70%. And we can also reduce the propulsion energy. We have examples in nature, and we can be inspired by nature. There is also something that is called digital design, allowing us to provide a shape or a functional geometry to the ship or to the boat. We can even use cleaner energy with sails. For example, solar sails are very useful, and we can consider the production of sun and wind energy that can be used to move boats. And the same study allows us to save energy that is distributed on board. So even the optimization of the route, this is something that we can do. We know those techniques. And why don't we implement those techniques while waiting for the great transition? I think that it would be very useful. We can prove the possibility for a ship to travel by hydrogen. There are several solutions available, and we are trying to understand what is the best solution, or even a mix of a couple of solutions. And this depends for sure on the type of vessel, the path, the route, and the regional and international situation, of course. Thank you very much. I will go back now to my friend Giancarlo Cristofalo. Okay, Fugro is in charge of the mapping of oceans, but what do you find in the seabed, and why is it that important to have a clear mapping of oceans? Because we already know what is the depth of oceans, but why do you do this more in detail? Well, first of all, I will reply with a metaphor. Well, on land, we have the clear mapping of the emerged lands, and we base our work for monitoring, for the building activities of any plant. So the fact of knowing the territory is fundamental. But what do we find in the oceans and in the seabed? We have to make a distinction between projects such as Seabed 2030, which aims at mapping we have 9 vessels, and we use the vessels in the field of renewable energies or other kind of energies, marine energies. Those vessels collect data, and some private actors will provide the data to Seabed 2030, or during transfers from a continent to another, we continue to acquire the data and we provide them to the international community. So this has a very important relevance at a global level. Just to give you an example, in the latest years, we got 2 million of cubic meters of information that are relatable to the extension of Mexico or Saudi Arabia. This is the quantity of data that we managed to collect in the latest years. And for 1 year, we have participated in the research of a disappeared plane, and we carried out a mapping when we discovered seamounts and submarine volcanoes that we didn't know were there. So we supported the discovery of new geological facts of our oceans, and this concerns the overall picture. But as the private company, we carry out specific studies, for example, on wind farms and in Italy. So what do we look for? We look for areas that in some way are sustainable towards the engineering and the design of a wind farm. So we look for areas that have these specific features with a lesser impact on environment, and we look for the best areas where it is possible to create sustainable plans for wind farms, for example, or floating solar panels. I really like the idea of the energy archipelago you have mentioned, because in those wind farms, we can locate also other activities. And as we said, in Italy, we have a huge challenge ahead, because among the 90 projects that were presented, only 4 are bottom fixed in the Adriatic Sea, and all the others are floating projects with more than 150 meters depth. So those technologies can be fixed at 70 meters depth, and we have to think about moorings, and wind turbines needs to be fixed to the soil. So we look for areas where geohazard risks or areas that have to be avoided. For example, there are some particular habitats to be preserved. So we provide those tools to avoid the areas that are particularly valuable, close to special protected areas or fishing areas. The areas where the wind farms are located in the Strait of Sicily or the Strait of Sardinia, so the western part of Sardinia, in the northern and southern part, and in the straits, for example, the Strait of Otranto and in the northern part of the Adriatic Sea. But since these are bottom fixed, they have a lower cost. So if there is less wind available, there will be a positive outcome in any way. In any ways. So we provide all of those data to all the engineers and the operators who will build those plans. We also provide a consultancy on how and where to build the facilities. This is great. I will go back to Gianmaria Sannino. So I interrupted your speech while you were explaining to us what is happening right now at as per global warming and climate change. So you explained to us that global warming is anthropic, and in the late 100 years, it was triggered by human activity. So let's go and see what is happening now. So in addition to what could happen to our climate change, we try to provide solutions. Let's see what we are doing right now. Here you see the movement of the tide in the Mediterranean and the way it lowers and it becomes higher. Where you see the more intense colors, it means that the tide is higher. We know that the level of the sea has increased. This is the most updated projection of sea level rise. It will rise by other 70-80 centimeters all around the Mediterranean. So we know there is a problem here, and we try to fix it. Oceans are also compensating to climate change. 93% of all the warmth we have produced was stored in oceans. So the 7% of warmth that we have, in the plus 7%, remained in the atmosphere because they have a higher thermal capacity. And the poor oceans, not only they are the first target, the first victim of climate change. So we should try to see if they can help us, if oceans can help us in some way to mitigate climate change. Victor Hugo, for example, thought that ocean could be some sort of immense energy source, and even Joseph Conrad said so. He talked about the rage of the sea that is never is endless, and he defined the sea as a renewable energy. We used to discuss, they used to discuss since the 16th century about the energy of the sea, and if we'd use a boat in a port, we could exploit the movement to produce energy. Well, this Pierre-Simon Girard was completely right, but it is a little bit difficult to put into practice because, you know, the sea is full of energy, and this is the sum of all the energy that the seas could provide to us. The quantity is huge, and many times this is the energy that we use throughout a year. But the problem is that as a renewable energy, it is not very well distributed or all around the planet. Here you see where most of the energy is located, around the Antarctic area. So it is not that useful to us, for example. So we need to look for this energy. For example, with crude oil, we did this. And with AMS, we tried to do this. And we tried to understand the map of the concentration of sea energy coming from the waves. When we talk about the energy of waves, we talk about aeolic and wind energy, because you know that waves are created by wind. Where we have wind, we also have energy from the sea with some differences. So the wind, it has a flux where there are waves, but the waves will be generated in that area, but also hundreds of kilometers away, because you know that the wind transfers energy to the waves and waves propagate. And if I'm able to find the right location for my technology, the technology will be functioning even when there won't be wind. Here we have details, very technical details, but I wanted to show what happens in practical terms. Here we have the Strait of Gibraltar, a very important area for tides. And where can we find tides? From Messina in Sicily. This is the tool that we use for calculations, and with 40 of those items that are very small, we could have 1/3 of the necessary energy for Messina for a whole year. What we are doing now, well, there are several projects, pilot projects for beach waves, for sea waves. And the most important thing is that European Commission has already decided that 12 to 15% of energy from today to 2050 will be produced by a mix of waves and streams from the sea. And Italy will join this project and this process, and for sure in the Mediterranean we are the leaders. Well, it is very interesting as an explanation, because we do not often know what is the possibility to produce energy from waves, while it is a very promising field. In Northern Europe, they are producing energy from tides. They create some very huge wind turbines, and we do not have such strong currents. So the perspective here is a little bit different. I go back to what said Elena before. The ecologic transition and decarbonization of our society should come from a mix of technologies. We do not have a unique and definite technology that can allow us to decarbonize completely the society. Well, we will need 30 years, but in the meanwhile, how can we decarbonize with very little tips? For example, change the shape of boats, of vessels, would allow us to decarbonize a little bit. And to use the movement of the sea will allow us to reduce the consumption of energy in Messina. So let's put together all of those elements to decarbonization. Well, this was my reflection. Simply, it was just a suggestion and a remark. I have a question to Stefania. As a journalist, I followed the law Salva Mare, to save the sea, which was sponsored by the Ministry of Environment, Sergio Costa, allowing to fishermen to bring plastics at sea. They used to collect with the nets. And it was crazy because Italian laws provided for this situation. If fishermen used to collect plastics at sea and they used to take all of those waste on land, they were fined. So all the plastics they collected, they used to throw it back at sea. Then fortunately, we had this law, the law to save the sea, so that fishermen could discharge on land the plastics they used to collect by reducing by far the presence of waste at sea. First of all, I have a question. How is it going in practical terms, this plastic collection, and in which other way can fishermen contribute to the protection of the environment at sea?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. Together with Minister Costa, I have to say that we as a fisheries operator, we have collaborated with the minister in order to implement the so-called Salva Mare law, the Save the Sea law, and for fishermen having, for instance, waste like plastic as well as other, because in our seas we do not just find plastic, but of course we find motorbikes or dishwashers or fridges or, well, any other, object. But we decided that also according to the law, if waste was poured into the sea, then of course they were imposed, for instance, fines, plus there were, criminal law provisions that were implemented. So you were talking about, for instance, the areas in which it's possible to discharge items. Unfortunately, in our ports, the management of waste collected by fishermen, it's not always so easy. And especially when, for instance, we have situations involving the community recycling areas, because there are always, parts that pertain to the competencies of the municipality or the healthcare system. So the framework is rather difficult in some cases. So, of course, fishermen live on fish and they want to have a clean sea. And the problem, however, is then transferred to other, let's say, situations, because where we have a specific community recycling areas, well, these community recycling areas are managed by, for instance, structural funds or specific projects. But the problem today is that we should act as a system, because the three main activities involving the governance and the operators and also research, well, they have to bear in mind that it's necessary to define a national set of laws relating to the management of waste, especially when it comes to the anthropic waste. And the EU is dealing with it. And also I'm talking about the situations in which waste and how waste has to be retrieved and put back in the market. But we as Federpesca, and I'm also feeling I can talk on behalf of our colleagues, well, we are an important player, and we have a lot of projects involving national projects and European projects on the plastic collection, for instance. So what fishermen can do more, and then I come to the last question you asked me, is, well, fishermen might be involved in the set of actors or stakeholders within the circular economy. Why not? I mean, instead of providing incentives that are not so fundamental for the management of fishing activities for cooperatives or for a small fisherman, why can't we imagine we have to act in a framework of circular economy by also adding, for instance, the fisheries cooperatives, and they should not just be an economic operator, but rather part of the cycle, let's say. Okay, I've stick to the time allotted. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so in this panel, we've seen a lot of different ways to make the presence of human beings at sea sustainable, and also we've seen the wind parks, to exploit sea resources without polluting, and we saw the commitment of fishermen when it comes to sustainability, and we saw how their sector has become heavily regulated, and we've seen how men study and we have a precise idea of what is happening at sea, and how we need to see how the sea resources can be exploited in a sustainable way. So we've seen a lot of positive things. The problem is that the reality is not often like that. Please consider that in the world, there's 1 truck of plastic poured at the sea per hour. So in 2050, if we continue like this, and also with the pouring of plastic at sea, the plastic at sea will exceed the quantity and the volume of animals that live in the sea. But guys, then if we don't do something in this connection, that is to say, we need to stop, for instance, pouring plastic at sea. If we don't stop using the resources in our globe, how will the world end up? I mean, if we don't adopt sustainable behaviors.
Acqua. Tutto intorno c'era solo acqua e gli pareva strano. Una distesa infinita, tutta blu, senza puntini di tinta industriale a marcare la linea dell'orizzonte. Ecco, questo pensava mentre galleggiava a pancia in su, cercando di riprendere le forze, sostenuto dalla prima tanica di plastica che gli era capitata sotto mano e aveva infilato sotto la schiena, con la speranza che l'inerzia delle onde lo trasportasse a riva. A quest'ora qualcuno se ne sarà accorto sullo yacht. Erano tutti ubriachi, quando aveva deciso di fare lo scherzone del secolo, arrampicarsi sull'hardtop e lanciarsi a volo d'angelo sui cuscini della zona relax. Piano mai attuato, perché nella scalata al tetto dell'imbarcazione il mocassino di camoscio aveva perso presa, facendolo finire in mare. Il contatto con una superficie granulosa, dorata, nuova, gli suggerì che aveva toccato terra, una terra strana. Si attaccava ai pantaloni fradici mentre si trascinava fuori dall'acqua e con il poco fiato rimasto chiedeva aiuto. Poi tutto si fece buio.
Era stato il tepore del fuoco a risvegliarlo, l'acqua fresca portata alla bocca da una mano screpolata, ruvida ma gentile. Pressioni aguzze sulle natiche, versi, stridi notturni, rumori inediti tra le fronde di quelli che prima chiamavano alberi. Sì, alberi. Aveva visto un documentario una volta che stava male. Raccontami, com'è che procede lì fuori? Gli aveva chiesto una voce carezzevole. Non si sposava con la ruvidezza della mano. Devo dirglielo, devono saperlo che ci sono riuscito.
Si era addormentato prima che potesse anche immaginare una risposta. Al risveglio, con le prime luci dell'alba, finalmente aveva visto il volto dell'uomo che lo aveva salvato. A prima vista somigliava di più a un albero che a un essere umano, vestito di foglie e ramenti intrecciati, si sarebbe mimetizzato con la foresta. Se non fosse stato per il sorriso, bianchissimo sulla pelle abbronzata.
Secondo i miei calcoli, sono qui da 30 anni, gli aveva detto, senza dargli il tempo di riprendersi dal sonno. Quell'informazione non richiesta lo aveva svegliato di colpo.
30 anni? Ma io voglio tornare a casa!
Ma dimmi com'è diventata casa! Il mondo, oltre quest'isola!
E lui aveva cercato di ricordarselo, di visualizzare il panorama a cui era abituato. Una distesa di plastica, multicolore asfalto, inframmezzata da costruzioni altissime, cattedrali nel deserto. Il mondo ormai era ridotto al solo dentro. Anche la spiaggia, anche il mare erano ricostruiti in forma sintetica dentro a edifici enormi.
Dentro si poteva trovare tutto ciò di cui si aveva bisogno. Quella dello yacht per una notte era stata una bravata. Avevano deciso di lasciare il villaggio vacanze e navigare attraverso le isole di plastica che tappezzavano l'oceano come un puzzle. Insomma, com'è diventato il mondo?
Liscio. Cioè, senza tutte queste cose che pungono, che si infilano nelle scarpe, tra le dita, senza tutta questa sporcizia.
Non è rimasto niente, aveva sussurrato l'uomo albero. Quelle cose che pungono sono bastoncini di legno. Ci accende il fuoco, li uso per cacciare, per pescare. E questa è sabbia rosa. Ai miei tempi la gente spendeva un sacco di soldi per trovare spiagge come questa. Non è sporcizia. Io mi ci lavo i denti. Che dici? Funziona? Sono bianchi?
Bianchissimi.
Poi l'uomo albero aveva iniziato il suo racconto. 30 anni prima era felice. Aveva finalmente trovato un lavoro. Non solo ben pagato e in regola, ma anche in linea con i suoi principi etici e morali. Era diventato controllore di un marchio di pesca sostenibile. Il suo compito era quello di salire sui pescherecci e verificare che le operazioni si svolgessero secondo gli standard di ecosostenibilità, fondamentali per ottenere il bollino smeraldo. Quello che quando andavi al supermercato a comprare i bastoncini di merluzzo ti convinceva a spendere un po' di più, ma con la consolante certezza di stare facendo qualcosa di buono per il pianeta.
Le linee guida erano semplici. Lasciare in mare abbastanza pesci per la riproduzione, minimizzare l'impatto sull'ecosistema, gestire la pesca in maniera responsabile. E lui ci credeva, era profondamente convinto della nobiltà della sua missione. Del resto era sempre stato un sognatore, che poi tutti glielo facevano notare come fosse un difetto.
La prima notte che era andato in porto si era accorto subito che qualcosa non andava. Era bastato uno sguardo per riconoscere le alte braccia a poppa delle imbarcazioni che prendevano il largo, braccia che trainavano per miglia e miglia le reti della pesca a strascico, la più devastante per l'ecosistema marino. Quelle reti erano il nemico numero 1 dell'oceano. Distruggevano, asportavano qualunque cosa incontrassero sul fondale. Pesci, invertebrati, coralli, alghe, posidonie.
Quelle reti smuovevano il carbonio che gli oceani avevano assorbito, di fatto ripulendo l'atmosfera. Carbonio che se ne sarebbe rimasto indisturbato negli abissi, se lo strascico non avesse cominciato ad arare i fondali, liberandolo in parte nell'aria, in parte nell'acqua. Aria che si faceva ogni giorno più inquinata, acqua che si faceva ogni giorno più acida.
Quelle reti intrappolavano pesci di ogni età, adulti e giovani, pesci cui non veniva lasciato neanche il tempo per riprodursi.
Quelle reti catturavano indiscriminatamente specie in via d'estinzione, cetacei, squali, tartarughe, esemplari per cui l'incontro con le maglie dello strascico significava morte certa, anche fossero stati ributtati subito in acqua.
Quelle reti di plastica avevano sostituito le reti di canapa usate secoli prima. Canapa che una volta dismessa si trasformava in cibo per i pesci, mentre la plastica restava a galleggiare in mare per centinaia di anni.
Quelle reti non avrebbero dovuto trovarsi su pescherecci che aspiravano al bollino di pesca sostenibile.
Quando salì su una delle imbarcazioni e lo fece presente al capitano, lui lo rassicurò. Ah sì, sono le vecchie navi dello strascico, ma riconvertite. Non si preoccupi, dottore. Quando presero il largo e i verricelli si misero in azione per calare quelle reti in mare, l'uomo albero tornò dal capitano, che stavolta lo liquidò in una risata. Ma tu non devi stare a guardarti in giro, tu devi solo mettere il timbro. Non te l'hanno spiegato? Là c'è la busta, il bonus per l'incomodo.
L'uomo albero aveva lasciato la busta al suo posto e una volta a terra aveva fatto il suo dovere, inviato la segnalazione. La notte successiva era salito su un altro peschereccio ed era stato un attimo. Una volta a largo si era sentito sollevare dalle gambe e pluff, era finito in mare. E non aveva reagito, non aveva urlato, non si era sbracciato per farsi vedere, sperando che qualcuno lo ritirasse su, dicendogli che era stato solo uno scherzo, una piccola intimidazione, perché capisse qual era il suo vero lavoro. Si era girato, pancia in su, aveva allargato braccia e gambe, tirato su il bacino stringendo gli addominali e si era abbandonato alle correnti. E non aveva lasciato spazio alla disperazione. In realtà non si era mai sentito così libero, in pace, come ora che andava alla deriva, sotto una notte stellata di quelle che in terraferma non si vedevano più. Poi era arrivato sull'isola.
All'inizio era stato uno shock. I colori erano molto più vividi di quelli a cui era abituato. Il verde brillante degli alberi, lo smeraldo cristallino dell'acqua, il rosso carico dei coralli, il rosa cangiante della sabbia. A lungo si era domandato se non avesse varcato una porta spazio-temporale, se non fosse finito in un'altra dimensione precedente all'antropizzazione selvaggia che stava portando il pianeta al collasso. Alla fine si era risposto che l'unica cosa che gli importava veramente era sopravvivere in quell'angolo di paradiso, senza danneggiarlo. E così aveva fatto per tutti quegli anni. Pescava e cacciava solo lo stretto necessario a riempirsi lo stomaco.
Non sprecava cibo, mai. Aveva costruito una rete con le fibre di palma a maglie molto larghe per prendere solo i pesci più grandi. Aveva imparato a orientarsi nelle stagioni riproduttive della fauna marina. Il suo pensiero era cambiato. Non mangiava più quello che voleva, ma quello che il mare gli offriva, al tempo giusto.
Non era più lui il centro del mondo, la specie suprema, intorno a cui tutto ruotava. Il centro era il tutto e lui una minuscola parte di quel tutto. Non era stato semplice. All'inizio l'isola non si fidava, gli si era rivoltata contro. La prima volta che aveva provato a pescare, il mare era esploso in burrasca. Una medusa lo aveva ustionato con un veleno tanto forte da portarne ancora i segni. E la pinna di uno squalo lo aveva minacciato in lontananza. La serenità di oggi se l'era guadagnata. Aveva osservato con pazienza. All'inizio si era nutrito di soli vegetali e aveva rischiato anche l'avvelenamento. Aveva studiato le maree, i cicli di vita di flora e fauna marina. Aveva imparato dal mare e il mare lo aveva ricompensato.
Ora però era curioso, lui voleva sapere che cos'era successo, se anche fuori dall'isola gli esseri umani avevano capito quale fosse l'unica via da percorrere. Con un cenno della testa il nuovo naufrago gli fece intendere che no.
Anche se non se ne sarebbe mai andato, anche se non avrebbe mai abbandonato il suo angolo di paradiso, l'uomo albero disse che avrebbe voluto mettersi in contatto con loro, raccontare all'umanità che un'altra via era possibile, che lui ce l'aveva fatta. Era bastato cambiare il punto di vista. Era bastato vedersi come parte di un tutto da accogliere, non da dominare. Ma possibile che là fuori nessuno ci avesse pensato?
Il nuovo arrivato batté i mocassini uno contro l'altro per pulirli dalla sabbia ci affondava i piedi nudi e non gli sembrava più tanto fastidiosa. Io voglio tornare a casa e basta. Io voglio mangiare il tonno della scatoletta. Sì, quello che sa di prosciutto cotto. Sì, io voglio le scorte di bastoncini in freezer quando non mi va di cucinare, voglio stare comodo, voglio stare dentro, dove non ci sono i pericoli, dove la vita non fa paura.
L'uomo albero si incupì per un istante. Il ricordo di quella vita insensata gli aveva dato un morso al cuore. All'inizio io ero come te. A ogni alba speravo di vedere una nave al largo che arrivasse a portarmi via, finché un giorno la speranza non si è trasformata in paura. Che quella nave arrivasse per davvero e con lei altre navi a devastare tutte insieme anche la nostra ultima isola. Ti serve solo un po' di tempo per capire cos'è che ti fa davvero paura. Magari in fondo ti spaventa di più la vita dentro che quella fuori. Magari è per questo che hai convinto i tuoi amici sbronzi a uscire dalle acque sicure con lo yacht. Magari non sei proprio scivolato, o meglio, sei scivolato, ma la tua mano non si è mossa verso l'appiglio che ti avrebbe mantenuto a bordo. Perché secondo me, qui sull'isola, ci arrivi solo se lo vuoi. Ma la consapevolezza di questo desiderio non te la posso dare io. No, devi raggiungerla da solo, coi tuoi tempi. E a quel punto anche per te, qui sarà tutta meraviglia.
Grazie.
Grazie ai nostri attori, veramente bravi.
Thank you. Thanks to our actors. You are amazing and extraordinary. But just a couple of minutes more, because the representative from Federpesca was somehow involved in a sort of, 2 minutes are not enough. Okay, but I'll try. Can you hear me? Okay. You are great. Absolutely. I have a suggestion. The first suggestion is that, well, acting as the fisherman that speaks with a Sicilian dialect is not correct, because strict orders of, for instance, people at sea, well, they are young migrants and they are not alone at the sea. So I do invite you to update a little bit and to avoid having the stereotypes of fishermen that speak dialects. Second point, as of today, for instance, any type of fisheries, including, for instance, the trolling, well, it is well regulated. And of course, you, or the troll net, you have been extraordinary, but I would change the perspective on the fleet that are not having a European flag. I would consider, for instance, fleets that are not regulated under the European Commission, but rather that are more competitive today because they do, for instance, illegal trolling, and also as compared to the European or Italian fleets, especially in the Mediterranean, they are detrimental, and they have a fishery which is intensive and also non-sustainable. And also, of course, this is regulated, and we have a lot of checks and controls on for instance, the quantity and types of fish that we take. And also the catch is well regulated, or the whole. but we're also trying to improve the level of technology or to use all of the technologies that are advanced. That's it from me. Just one thing I wanted to say, because our fishermen, the European fishermen, because here I would like to talk not just of Italy, but I'd like to talk about Europe, because our fishermen are the only operators that have, for instance, specific fines. So if, for instance, they don't declare, don't make correct statements of all the quantities of fish they have criminal sanctions that are imposed, which does not exist elsewhere. Okay. The debate is beautiful, but now let's have something to eat. So let's close this session and let's break for lunch. So see you later. Thank you.